Okay, Titi, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can now.
Okay, that's good. So, and can you see the screen, Titi? Let me know in the chat if you can see the screen, please. If you can see the screen, just type yes, I can in the chat. So I know you can see it, please. I'm waiting on that to come move on. Uki can't see the screen. Why? I mean, can you see my screen? Can you see my Photoshop? Can you see this image on your screen?
Yeah, hi, Titi can see.
Okay, yes. I'm waiting for someone. Okay. So let's move on. Let's move on. So what we'll be treating for today is frequency separation. In the mail I sent yesterday, I asked that we all studied frequency separation because that's what we're doing today. I don't want you to study it to know it coming to the class. That's not what I want. That's not my goal. My goal is for you to, just have an idea, just an idea. You don't need to master it coming to the class. Whenever I tell you to study something ahead of the class, I don't want you to master it. I don't want you to know it tactically or whatever. I just want you to have an idea about it. That way, it will be easier for us to work on it together and be on the same frequency when we do. So today we'll be dealing with frequency separation, and like I explained yesterday, frequency separation is the process of taking an image and separating it into textures and colors, two equal parts, textures and colors, so that you're able to work on the color layer, because the color layer contains the blemishes and the color discolorations on the skin. You're able to have smoothing that without affecting the textures. Why? Because the textures are being secured on a different layer. That was what I explained yesterday. And I sent you a video that will detail how to carry out the separation process in Photoshop. But today I'm going to be teaching it again. But I wouldn't want to dwell so much on the process of separating. I want to dwell more on what you do after separating, because you have a video with you to guide you on. The video I sent you was made by myself. The video guides you on how to do the separation process. Because if I dwell so much on that, participants can now see your screen. Okay. Can everyone see my screen now? At least let me hear from Titi. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see.
Yes, I can see your screen.
Very good, thank you. So, let's move on. Then today I'm going to be dwelling more on the separation process, how you go about it, and then what you do after separating, how you work with the separated layers. So this is the separation process. Like I told you yesterday, you use Command or Control J. If you're using Windows, please, whenever I say Command, what I mean is Control. But if you're using a MacBook, I mean Command. That's the Command button. I don't know what's that. Okay. So let's move on. So Command J, you make sure you click on the background layer. The background layer, make sure you select it. Then you click on Command J. That duplicates it once. You hold Command and click J. Then you hold Command and click J again So what you do is, what I like to do is I like to rename these layers. So you rename by double clicking on the words here. Then I'm going to name this. I'm going to rename this textures. And the second one, I'm going to name colors. So I have 3 different layers, but I've not carried out the separation yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the textures away from this layer called colors, because the layer called colors still is just a duplication of the entire image, of the full image. They're all still the full image. They're just duplications of this particular one. So the separation process has not been done yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this layer called colors and remove all the textures away from the image on this layer, and then take all the textures I've deducted from here and then put them here. So how I'm going to do that is I'm going to turn off the texture layer, turn it off, select the color layer, go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And for this image, I'm going to set it at 13.0. Basically, this number, this radius is determined by, you can zoom into your image. And then if the more you increase the radius, the more blurry the image gets. So you have to wait for that. I think the system is handling. Sorry about this, but this happens sometimes. So let's just hold on. It should be fine in less than a minute. So, like I explained, the more you increase this number, the more blurry the image gets. The less the number, the less blur. What Gaussian blur basically does is it blurs the image by simply removing the textures away. So at 0.1, this is probably a non-blurry image. So the more you increase this number, the more textures disappear from the image. Such that you're gonna have something that looks like a blur. Something that looks like this. So you just want to take away the textures from the image to the point where what you have left is colors. So you don't want to take so much of it. You don't want to do this. You want to still have the colors in the image intact while the textures are deleted from the image. Okay. So 13 is fine for me. So I'm going to click on OK. Then the next thing I'll do is select the texture layer, turn it on, come to image up here, Trust me, the videos I sent you details everything I'm doing right now. You just have to study. Apply image. Change it from, you click on this and then you select colors, or you select whatever name you give this particular layer here. Then you make sure this is on subtract. Subtract. You make sure your scale here is 2 and your offset is 128. This doesn't change. These are permanent figures. This has to be 100%. This has to be 2. This has to be 128. And the blending mode here has to be subtract. Then your layer here, you select this layer, whatever name you give it, you select it here. Then you click on OK. Then it's going to look grayish. Then to make it look, transparent, visible, change it from normal. You change the blending mode of that layer because each layer here has a blending mode. This is called your blending mode. So you make sure you select the texture layer, then you change this blending mode here from normal to linear light. As you can see, as I change the layers, the blending mode changes. So you make sure your textures is set to linear light. This is very simple, trust me. At first, it's going to feel a bit complex. It's going to feel, like work. But then again, once you get used to it, it's going to be very quick for you. It's become like, just like muscle knowledge or something, very, very quick for you. So, like at this point, I do this without thinking. So it's just going to take a bit of practice and then you perfect it. Then what I like to do is I usually don't like working on this color layer itself. I like working on a duplicated color layer. So when I'm smoothing the colors, I'm going to be doing it on a duplicated color layer. Reason being that if I want to be able to, if I make so many mistakes on this while editing it, I want to be able to just delete and then duplicate again and then start working. But if I don't do that, and I'm working directly on the color layer, if I make so many errors here, I wouldn't be able to go back. It means I'll have to start editing the image afresh. But that's the reason why yesterday I emphasized on duplicating your layers, so that if you make errors, you can always just delete the duplicated version. You can just delete the duplicated version and then just, get back to working on what you're working on. So Titi said she didn't get any videos yesterday. I think it has something to do with the problem you're having with your email. I think it has something to do with that. Because I sent a link containing the videos to everyone. And please remember, you have to download the videos within a week because the link I sent to you expires within a week. There are way more we should be way more than this, but I think so many people are just waiting on the recorded class, and they wouldn't get the opportunity to ask their questions, which is the sad part of it. But it's fine. Let's move on. So we'll be working on this the duplicated color layer. That is this layer here. You duplicate, and what we'll be doing is we're going to be smoothing out the colors, the discoloration on the face. We'll be smoothing it out. Like if I turn off the texture layer, you can see the color layer. And you can see the discoloration on the skin. We'll be making it very even. We'll be evening out the discoloration on the skin. All these discolorations, we'll be making them even. So all the discolorations on the skin, these patches and everything, we're going to make them very even when we're done. And then the image is going to be very smooth, but then again, we're going to have the textures intact. The reason why we're going to have textures intact is because the textures are secured on this layer and not on this one. So let's move on. So we'll be working with this tool called the Mixer Brush tool. You find your tool here, the Mixer Brush tool. Please note that every single tool here has a different setting. As you can see, as I'm changing the tools, you can see the settings up here on the screen. They keep changing. And if you remember what I said yesterday, I don't know how to use all the tools here. And I don't expect you to know how to use all the tools here, because not all the tools here are relevant to photographers. Not all the tools here are relevant to beauty researchers or to researchers. It's not, the tools here are all not very relevant, but just know the tools that are relevant to you in a particular situation and just learn how to use those tools and work with those tools. You don't have to learn how to use all the tools here. And don't let Photoshop overwhelm you. Just know how to do what you need to do in Photoshop and get out. Because Photoshop is very complex. Photoshop was not built for just photographers. Photoshop was built for graphic artists, for cartoonists, for everybody, for engineers, for so many people. You understand? Yeah. And so don't let it overwhelm you. Just understand the tool you need to use and just move on. So now the tool we're using now is the Mixer Brush tool. If what you have here is the brush, you can just right click on the brush and then you go down and you find your Mixer Brush tool. All these are the different types of brushes in Photoshop. So you can just right click and then go down and find your Mixer Brush tool. Mixer Brush tool. Then, as like I said, every brush comes with its own settings. So you set your brush, your Mixer Brush tool in this exact way. It's also in the video I sent you. The video I sent you, you find this exact settings here. You select this one. You're going to have problems. I've taught people, I've had classes with people, and then they always come back to me with one thing, and that is the fact that their Mixer Brush tool behaves funny. That even after, carrying out the fluid separation process perfectly, and they start working with the Mixer Brush tool, the Mixer Brush tool starts acting funny, or starts giving them funny results, and it's not mixing or blending perfectly, which is why you need to stick to these settings this exact way. Don't skip anything. Make sure this one is the only one selected. Make sure custom 30, 30, 20, 20, 10. And then this is probably 1% or 1 degree. But make sure it is like this in this exact way. Wet 30, load 30, mix 20, flow 20, 10, 1 degree. Make sure it's this exact way. You can just click on it and type it out, or however you want to do it, but make sure this is the exact settings you have here. And then your brush will work perfectly. If you're having difficulty with your brush, it's because you're not setting this perfectly. Now, this is the interesting part. What the Mixer Brush tool does is it mixes everything in its path. So you're just going to be rubbing the brush around, and everything you rub the brush over, the brush mixes. The brush blends. It's like a blending brush. If you rub it over anything, it blends it. So it's like what's the blending brush the makeup artists use. So this will help you blend everything on its path. So, as you can see, I was able to smoothen the forehead there. Now, let me explain this. There are 2 things you want to maintain. Let me say 3 things. There are many other things you want to maintain, but 3 basic things you want to maintain and keep intact when you retouch your image. Those 3 things are your textures, your facial structure, and colors. Now, I talked about textures before, maintaining textures. That is the entire reason why you have your textures separated on a different layer when you're blending, because you want to maintain them. You don't want them to get smoothed out. Now, to maintain the texture, the structure of the face, let me explain this. The structure of the face is the major item or major thing that helps you retain resemblance in an image, or that helps you recognize a person from a picture. Now, a picture is shot on a two-dimensional surface or a flat surface. A paper, a screen, whatever it is, it's a flat surface. But still, from a flat surface, you're able to tell the structure of the face. You're able to tell that this part of the face is more pronounced than this part, that the person has a more pronounced cheekbones, you can tell. And the reason why you can tell that is because of the structure of the face, which is visible, though on a flat surface, it's visible in the image, you can tell that. Now, the main thing that helps you identify or decipher the structure of the face is the highlights and shadow pattern on the face. For example, I'm able to tell that this place is more swollen than here, or this place shoots out in the image compared to this place, that this place is deeper than this place. I'm able to tell that this place is deeper than this place. I'm able to tell that she has a shallow nose, but I'm able to tell the structure of the nose for the fact that the highlights, everywhere you have highlights on the face, I'm able to tell there's a bone shooting out that particular part of the face. I can tell that there's a bone here. I can tell there's a bone here. I can tell there's a bone here. I can tell there's a soft tissue here because this place is dark. So the brighter parts of the face are usually the places where you have bones shooting out. So by the highlights and shadow distribution on the face, I can tell the structure of a person's face. That is how we are able to tell the structure of a person's face on a flat surface. And also, that is how we are able to recognize people from pictures, because we can tell their facial structures from the highlights and shadow distribution on the face. Now, if in the course of your editing, you make the mistake of destroying or flattening out the highlights and shadow distribution. For example, I make the mistake of blending the highlights and shadows to the point where there's no difference between the highlights and shadows on this forehead and on these cheekbones and on the nose. For example, I mix something like this. Now, if you look closely, you notice it looks like the nose has disappeared. It looks like the nose has disappeared. The reason why it looks like the nose has disappeared is because I made the mistake of blending out the shadows and highlights in the nose that help you recognize or, better still understand the structure of the nose. This thing is loading again. Oh, wow. So what you want to do when editing your image is you want to make sure that you don't blend out or mix out those highlights and shadows on the nose or different parts of the face that tell structure. So the way you do that is this. When you're blending, you make your brush size something that's not large enough to cover both the highlights and the shadows at the same time. But you reduce the brush to make sure it's something that's large, but not too large. Something like this is fine for the forehead. So when I'm mixing in the shadows, this is the shadows, and this is the highlights. When I'm mixing in the shadows, I don't drag the brush into the highlights. What I'm doing is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. The movements I make 3 movements. 1, back, forth, back. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and take your hand away. So every time you mix 1, 2, 3, you take your hand away. You come again, 1, 2, 3, go again, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, back, forth, back, back, forth, back, back, forth, back, back, forth, back, back, forth. You understand? Keep going. So 1, 2, 3, you shade on it, like you're painting. 1, 2, 3. You take your hand away. 1, 2, 3. You take your hand away. 1, 2, 3. Take your hand away. 1, 2, 3. Take your hand away. So you keep on moving around the image. So when I'm blending the highlights, I don't drag it into the shadows. And when I'm blending the shadows, I don't drag into the highlights. I work on the highlights independently and work on the shadows independently. So when you look at the forehead, this is what we have. This is before, and this is after. Before and after. So for here, I'm going to reduce the size. Now, notice, remember that the brush is going to mix everything in its path. Everything in its path, it's going to mix. So you don't want to have the brush touch the eyebrow. You don't want to have the brush touch the eyes. You don't want to have the brush touch the edge of the face. You want to keep everything within skin. Everything in the path of the brush must be skin. Do you understand? Everything in the path of the brush must be skin. So you don't. You remember 1, 2, 3. You can go over a spot 2 times. Remember when I'm working on the highlights, I'm working on the highlights. When I'm working on the shadows, I'm working on the shadows. I'm not going to drag the shadows into the highlights, neither will I drag the highlights into the shadows. So if you notice when I'm working on the nose, when I made the size something that's just small enough to pass on the shadows of the nose without touching the highlights, I pass for the highlights without touching the shadows. So when blending here, I'm only touching the shadows. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I'm only touching the shadows. And when I'm touching the highlights, I'm only touching the highlights. Because I want to maintain the structure of the nose, which we maintain here. Remember, the movement of your brush is in line with the structure of the face. So when I'm going this way, I'm going like this. I'll draw out something for you now, so you guys can understand this better.
You're meant to give me something. Are you meant to deliver something to me? All right.
So if you look closely, it's before, this is after, this is before, this is after, before and after. So we're able to smoothen out the face, and we did not destroy the structure of our face. So we can still have we can still see, if you look closely, you can still see the highlights here. The highlights here. You can still see you can still see the shadows here, the shadows here, and the highlights here. But you can still see all of that there. But you don't have the face structure destroyed, which is a major goal for us. So I'm going to start this over again. I'm going to do it about 3 times so that we can all, understand this right now. I'll do it about 3 times. So I'm going to delete this duplicated layer where we worked on it. Before that, this is before and this is after. So I'm going to delete that layer. So you see all the work we did was gone, but I'm just going to duplicate again so we can carry on the work over again. Remember to duplicate is Command J for Windows, for MacBook, and for Windows users it's Control J. So when you're blending, let me do something quickly so I can. This is just for the sake of illustration, so you can better understand what I'm showing you. So when you blend the movement of your brush. You don't just move your brush anyhow, like just in whatever direction. I'm usually very specific about the movements of my brush. So when I'm working on this side, this part of the head, that's the shadows here. My brush goes in this direction or this direction. So I'm moving my brush like this, like this, like this, like this, like this, or like this, throughout this entire arc. Then in the middle of the forehead, I'm making circular strokes. So my brush will keep going in circles, 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 and circles throughout when I'm working on the middle. Then when I come to this part of the face, my brush goes in this direction. So when I'm moving here, I'm moving my brush like this, like this, like this, like this, like this, like this. like this, like this, like this, like this. That's how I move the brush. So for here, I go like this or like this. I go like this or like this. So when I'm working on this part, I'm moving my brush like this, like this, like this, like this. Then for the middle of the nose, I'm moving my brush like this, either in this direction or this direction. This is what I'm talking about. Or when I'm walking in the middle of the nose, I'm going in a straight direction. Or when I'm walking on this part, I'm going either like this or like this. So it's back and forth, moving like this. So try to understand the arrows. Then for this part of the face, I walk like this. And like this. Till they meet here. So I keep walking like this, like this, like this, and like this, and like this. So So when I work on this layer again, I want you to pay attention to the movement of the brush. You'll notice the movement of my brush is, very much in line with these directions I've just drawn. So if you can take a screenshot or you have a phone and you can take a picture of the screen, I'll let you do that now. So you can just understand how I work with the structure of the face. So let's move on. So I'm going to be deleting this layer because that layer only existed for the sake of illustration to show you the directions that I move my brush in. So this one. So watch me this time and watch me closely. I'm going to be repeating the process I carried out before. I want you to watch me closely. So I'm going to set the brush to something that's not too big, but that's large enough to do the job. If you notice, every stroke I'm taking follows that direction. So you see, I'm moving like this, like this, like this, and here I'm going in circles. Using the mixer brush tool. So here I'm going to reduce the size of the brush. So you notice I'm following this pattern.
This one, where is the plate? Can you wash it?
Titi, we can hear you. You notice everything is in line with the drawing I did, the diagram I just drew. Everything is in line. I'm following the pattern that I drew in the diagram. I'm following it. So my movement is 1, 2, 3. Take the brush up, 1, 2, 3, take the brush up. I'm just doing it so many times. And it looks like I'm doing it fast. So once you master this, this is how quickly you're editing your images. You don't have to, so which means you're going to be getting perfect results at a very fast rate. You understand? Like once you master this, you'll be editing so fast. You don't need to spend so much time on it. So this is before, and this is after. This is before, and this is after. This is before, and this is after. Before and after. Before and after. So before and after. So please, I need you to, I'm going to give us, say 5 minutes to drop. Samira asked the question. She said, reducing the brush is the same process as increasing the size of the brush, right? Yes, it is. Reducing and increasing the size of the brush is the same process. I'll give us 5 minutes for us to drop questions. So I'll just excuse and just drop as many questions as you'd like to drop on the chat. So I'll be expecting to get questions from you. Let me give you 5 minutes to do that. Okay. I think 5 minutes is too much. I think you can drop your questions in 2 or 3 minutes. So 2 or 3 minutes, drop your questions. I want everyone to have a question because I'm sure, except if everyone got it. So, but I want to see questions, please. Questions from everyone. Okay, let's move on. Let me go through the chat. So, I'll take the questions one after the other. Ajay did not drop any questions. I was expecting to see questions from him. But Ajay did not drop questions. Neither did Alex. Alex, I'm waiting on your question, Alex. It's important I get your question, Alex. Please drop a question. And Ajay images too. I'm expecting your question. So I'll start with the first question. The first question is from Samira. Samira said, is reducing the brush the same process as increasing the size of the brush? Well, yes, reducing the brush is the same process as increasing the size of the brush. There are two things you can do. There are two things you can do. You can either right click and then move this slider up and down to reduce or increase the size of the brush, or you can work with the brackets open or brackets close buttons. So the buttons on your keypad, brackets open and brackets close. So you can, with brackets open, you reduce the size of the brush. With brackets open, you increase the size of the brush. Those are shortcuts. Photoshop has so many shortcuts to make life easier for you. With brackets open, you reduce the size of the brush. Brackets close, you increase the size of the brush. So when you start working quickly, you may not have time to be doing this and all of that. So you will just work with brackets open, brackets close. Okay, Titi said, can we have the raw pictures for practice? Yes, I would make sure I mail this image, the raw version. I'll make sure I mail the raw image to you to practice today. Can the mixer brush remove lines under the eyes? Well, remember in frequency separation, we are separating the image into textures and colors. A line under the eye is going to fall on that. Let's look at this. Let me just explain this. So see, if I turn off the texture layer on the image, you notice the lines under the eyes disappear. If I turn them back on, the lines appear. If I turn off the textures, the lines disappear. If I turn on the lines, if I turn on the textures, the lines come back. That's because the lines are on the texture layer and not on the color layer. We work with the mixer brush tool on the color layer and not on the texture layer. You understand that? Work only on the color layer and not the texture layer. So what this means is that your mixer brush tool would not be ideal for getting rid of lines under the eyes. What you have to do is you work on the texture layer, which we'll be getting into in a bit. I'm going to, just touch on that part, touch on working on the texture layer. I'm going to touch on it today. So in the next class, we'll expatiate and we'll dwell more on that, more on working on the texture layer to perfect the textures in the image. So when you're working on the texture layer, that's when you're going to get rid of the lines in the eyes, the lines underneath the eyes. Okay, it's like the pics lost its glow. I guess we can use some tools action to retrieve it. Yes, when you're done working with frequency separation, it kind of looks like the image lost some kind of glow or something. But there's a process after this called dodge and burn, and there's another process called color grading. When we that's what we did on the last day of the class, dodge and burn and color grading. So when we get into that, I'll show you how you return the glow back into the image, how you give the image structure and all of that. If my picture is dark, Buki says, if my picture is dark, what can I do to brighten it up? Remember, Buki, when you were with us yesterday, if you were not with us yesterday, I think you should visit the video from yesterday where I talked about shooting in the raw format. I think what you should do is when you shoot with your camera, try to shoot in raw format, RAW format. That way, you'll be able to easily manipulate the colors, that easily manipulate the brightness or darkness of your image. So if you shoot in the raw format, you can easily brighten up your image, and then it's going to look natural. You can brighten it way more while retaining details than you would with a JPEG image. So when you're brightening your raw image, you brighten it and it still retains all the details on the skin. So you carry out the brightening process in Camera Raw. That's the first application that turns up. That's if you shoot in raw format. But if you shoot with a mobile phone, not to worry. You can come to this is called brightness and contrast adjustment layer. You can just come here and then brighten up your image or darken your image. That's a very simple way to do it. There are so many other ways to do it. So that's to brighten or darken your image. Darken if you over brighten your image. Samira says, can Photoshop app work on an iPhone, or is it just two photos? I believe there's I believe there's a Photoshop for iPhones, but it's not. It definitely can't do the work we're doing right now. It can't. The Photoshop is just gimmicks. It can't do the kind of work, kind of complex work we're doing right now. It can't. So what you need to do is to get Photoshop for your laptop or your computer. That way you'll be able to get the work done. Ajay Images said there are many ways of doing frequency separation. Can we assume this method is the best? I think I learned when I was learning frequency separation, I was able to learn so many methods, way too many methods, and I was able to learn so many of them. I even also learned micro dodge and burn, and I have so many of these processes in my head. But what I chose to teach, or what I'm teaching right now, is probably the easiest and surest way to get results. You understand? I'm teaching you the surest ways to get results. And the best is probably the best. There may be a better one out there, but this is the easiest. And this gives you just as great of a result as anyone will give you. So it depends on whichever you're comfortable with. You can also, after learning this, go on and learn the other methods that are out there. And then whichever you feel more comfortable with, please go on with it. But in my book, in my opinion, I think this is the better method. So Titi says again, are we to brush the lips soon? Let me go inside. You could brush the lips. You could do something like this. Even though sometimes the lips are already good in itself, so I usually feel like there's little to do. But on the last day, when I'm teaching you color grading, I'm also going to teach you, a method I more or less invented for blending out the lipstick and the eyeshadow and all of that. I'll teach that on the last thing. Then Alex says, my question may be a little diverted. I didn't start from the beginning. How do we fix hair frontal? Tomorrow I'm going to work on, for the sake of Alex and for the sake of a few others that may have this similar question. Tomorrow I'm going to work on an image that has hair in it, because I noticed this one doesn't have much hair. Okay, I didn't even fix the frontal here. She has small frontal. I didn't fix it. We didn't even do anything on it anyway, because it was perfectly laid. But there are so many cases where you have it's looking rough and all of that. So I didn't read too much here, but I'm going to work on an image that has hair tomorrow. So we can get that. So we can get that one. Then Bookie says, what kind of camera can you recommend for a makeup artist? For a makeup artist, I think you're basically just shooting portraits. Any camera is fine. Any camera is fine. Provided I would advise you to go for a modern camera that has modern features and all of that. But almost any camera is fine. I'm not one who's very particular about camera bodies, because I shoot an USR, but even when I was shooting with a 6D, I was still getting good results. And I know people that shoot with less cameras that also get good results. So I don't think your camera body is that much of an issue, but it depends on what brand you want to go for. Personally, I shoot Canon, and I'd advise people to shoot Canon, but Nikon is great. Nikon is awesome. Sony is also awesome. So the first question I ask you whenever you come to me to ask me about cameras is, what's your budget? Because I feel the question of what's your budget is more relevant or more realistic than the question of what camera, because there are so many cameras out there. So what's your budget? Because you can definitely get something good at whatever budget. So far you're starting from, say, $1,000. $1,000 is not, that's a lot. Maybe $800 or $700 of that. So I think you can get something very good from that project. Then I think that's the last question. Uki said thank you. You're welcome. So what I'm going to do now is okay, you're welcome. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, do I have to go over this again? I'm going to go over this again. So I'm going to go over this again. I'm going to repeat the process I did today. Then I'm going to teach you how to work on the texture layer. Then in the next class, I'm going to dwell more on it. So I'm doing it 3 times because I know many people would probably still have questions. So whatever you didn't get the first and second time, please watch my hands and you'll get it. I wouldn't be talking much this time because I did the talking in the first two times I did. Yes. So next thing I'm going to teach you is how to work on the texture layer. Leah, I want you to pay attention. So we move on to the texture layer. To move on to the texture layer, we have to select it. And the next thing we'll be doing is selecting this tool called the clone stamp tool. If you remember yesterday when we started the class, I basically gave an introduction to this tool called the clone stamp tool. Clone stamp tool. So I gave an introduction to how to use that tool, and if you remember, I told you there's a situation that's more ideal for using the tool, and this is the situation that's more ideal for using the tool when you're working on the texture layer. So what you do is so the textures include these pimples on the skin, these imperfections in the textures. We don't have so many of them because we got these hairs, these 3 hairs here. They'll fall under textures. Your lines under the eyes, all these ones are all textures. So the reason why we don't have so much of them is because when we started editing these images yesterday, we actually got rid of most of them. So remember how you work with the clone stamp tool. For example, if I want to get rid of the hairs here, I'll hold Alt, click on the clean area, and then so you're always constantly changing where you're copying from. What it's basically doing, it's trying to replace the area you're working on with the area you copied from. That's what it's trying to do. And if you look closely, what I'm doing is not affecting the colors in that area in any way. That's because the layer we're working on has just textures and not colors. So when I'm trying to, clone out something, the colors are not being copied. The only thing being copied is just the textures in that area. So the color doesn't change at all. The color remains intact. So that's the essence of frequency separation. So when you're working on the colors, the textures stay intact. When you're working on the textures, the color stays intact. She has good skin. I think tomorrow I'm going to work on a model that has more flaws on her skin. So that way we'll be able to get it more, because what I'm dwelling on tomorrow is the texture layer. So remember, the size of the clone has to be something similar to the size of what you're getting rid of. So I'm making the size of my brush the size of the pimples I'm working on. Are these pimples? Not really. These are like texture imperfections on the skin. Remember, if you're not doing the headshots, you may not really have to go in. You may not really have to go in this deep. So that's basically how it works. The reason we're not seeing so many flaws is so many This is why I don't have so much work to do, because she has good skin. But if you do something like a before and after, sorry about that. If you do it before, I only grouped to do it before and after. It's not something you compulsorily have to do. So if you do it before and after, you realize, looking at the texture, you see the hairs. This was all we mostly had to work on. The hairs around the eyes, you can see them gone while maintaining the texture. So the essence of frequency separation is you want to work on texture by maintaining colors and work on colors by maintaining textures. That's the basic, and that's for that. So any questions on that before we close for today? In the chats, do we have, let me take questions for the last time and we'll move on. Not everyone has to drop a question this time, but if you do, I'll just give you 2 minutes to ask a question, or questions or suggestions. If none, we can close for today. So what I'll be doing is I would send everyone the video from today. The blush is gone. We'll get the blush back. Don't worry, we'll get the blush back. You don't have to worry about that, Samira. We'll get our blush back. There's not much blush, but we'll get it back. When we do our dodge and burn, we get the blush back on the face. We get the blush back. We'll get our blush back, so you don't have to worry. We'll get a blush back. But we're just putting the skin now. We'll get our blush back. Then I'm going to send everyone, and if you want to be very light on your editing, trust me, you can be very light. What you can do is, if you feel you've overdone something, or you feel you've smoothened the face out too much, which I do most of the time, I do this most of the time, I'll just go to my color copy. That's the layer I've been working on so far, and just come here, click it. Once you select the layer, you come to opacity, and then you reduce the opacity. I usually reduce it to something like 50%. So if you feel you've overdone or you've lost a lot of things, so you can just come back to color copy, which is what you've been working on, and reduce the opacity, which is why you can only do this if you've duplicated, if you're working on your duplicated layer. So which is why you need to make sure you duplicate the color layer before you work on it. You don't need to duplicate the texture layer, but you make sure you duplicate the color layer before you work on it, and work on a duplicated layer. Then you can reduce the opacity to say 50%. So you can still, lay eyes on what you've done before, or if you feel you've overdone things, that's a good way to bring it back, by reducing the opacity. Opacity means visibility, so you can just do that. So I'll be sending this video of recorded class to everyone, so everyone can study it. And please, please, before the next class, make sure you study the video of frequency separation I sent yesterday. Make sure you study that video, and make sure you study today's video as well. Try your best to study it. I'm sure all your questions will be answered in the videos. So remember, Samira, if you want to get your blush back, you can just easily reduce the opacity of this layer. But there's also a process in the future when working in the future that I'm going to use to, to get to return the blush and the structure of the face. I'm going to restructure this face, so you don't have to worry. So in light of no questions, or since we have no questions, so that will be that for today. And please study. It's going to help us in the next class. Please study and have a good one.